Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. For the first time in 14 years, 3 Indian institutions led by the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, have made it to a list of the world's top 200 universities. The 2 other Indian institutions in the QS World University Rankings 2018 are IIT Bombay and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. This is the first time 3 Indian institutions have made it to the list since it started ranking universities in 2004. While IIT Delhi's rank rose 13 places from last year's 172, IIT B's ranking rose 40 places to 179. However, IISc slipped for the second straight year, coming in at 190, down from 152 last year and 147 the year before. MIT topped the rankings for the 6th consecutive year. It was followed by Stanford University and Harvard University in that order for the second year in a row. California Institute of Technology and University of Cambridge complete the global top 5. The UK-based ranking agency QS revealed its rankings on Wednesday. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze why India's universities continue to fare poorly in world rankings. Joining me on the program today are Sushma Yadav, Professor of Public Policy and Governance and member UGC, D.K. Bandyopadhyay, former Vice-Chancellor, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, T.K. Arun, editor, Opinion, The Economic Times, and Professor Pushpesh, Pant, political analyst. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Professor Yadav, I'd like to begin with you and start with your opening comments as far as the rankings of these universities are concerned. Why is it that we fail to make it into the top 100 or top 50?
I wouldn't still call it a failure, because I think we've begun quite recently. Earlier, the universities or institutes in India didn't really run into this race, because these public universities and public institutions were greatly in demand, and I think they were basking in that glory. It's very recent, because 2004 is not very far.
Yes.
And I think it's 2, 3, 4 years or last 5 years maybe when we started looking at these rankings, and we are opening into the global market. Earlier, they hardly had place for their own students. So they were not into that run, and I would say it's not bad that in so few years we've started coming into this. And I'm very sure as soon as we get into this race, now we are getting into, it's a race, you all know. We get into this race, I'm sure we will not lag behind like we do in sports.
Do we need to be in this race?
I think now we can't avoid this race, because there are many countries, and I know about them, who are trying to turn education into a tool of trade. And if our students are going out looking at the world's rankings, and rankings do matter when you go into the job market, so I think we really can't avoid it. And we may also attract foreign students, because now going to foreign universities is not difficult. I won't say it's a dream. It was a dream maybe earlier much more. But going into foreign universities or going to foreign universities is not very difficult for the elite classes of different countries, developing as well as, of course, developed never wanted to. But now maybe there also some people look forward to it. And maybe there are some subjects which we can sell better. Although selling should not be educational priority at all. But then we move with the time, or we keep resisting. We have been expanding till now, and we try to give excess. But giving access to poor quality, I think, is no solution. And ultimately, quality has to come, and it comes only when there are some kind of rankings. Otherwise, there are some very good institutions, and there are some very bad institutions, and people go to both. Those who can't get into the best go to the worst or the lowest, as it is. I don't say there should be good, bad, and worst, or best and the worst, but I think that kind of quality and ranking. Now they are coming into rankings, but rankings are always there in our mind. You look at Delhi University, you look at universities in Delhi, and you know people have rankings in their minds, and there are choices. Therefore, you can't avoid this ranking.
Sure.
It's much better that you get into the race and win there as well.
Okay. Get into the race and win there as well. Remains to be seen when our universities enter the top 100. Professor Pant, do you share the same views as Professor Yadav?
I think she will forgive me if I don't share the views entirely. I agree with her on many issues, but on this one, I think I will be a contrarian. First of all, I don't think let's rejoice. The 3 institutions which have made to the list to my mind, are not universities. An IIT is an IIT is an IIT, as Gertrude Stein would have said about rose is a rose is a rose, and they were not meant to be universities. University, by definition, is an educational institution of liberal education with universal ambitions. Now, if you are a technology institute, you can be given a status of a degree grant status of a university, and you can rejoice that you have made it to the list. Same applies to the Indian Institute of Science to a very large extent. Is ironical, since Dr. Manmohan Singh treated IITs and IISc as a special category and made special provisions for their pursuit of excellence. They have slipped some of them have gone up. That's point one. I also don't think that for the first time the Indian institutions have made this. I recall when I was still working in JNU and not retired, there was great happiness in JNU once that when we had made it to the list of the first 100 towards the bottom, then we slipped, and then we rejoiced we were in the first 200. Then we beat our breast because Delhi University and Punjab University had taken the lead over us. So that's one part of the business. I think part of it is the Machiavellian mindset that you want a certification from the West that you are good enough to be treated as a peer. Now, you are not treated. The first 5 are in a league of their own, and the bottom is, I mean, then some of them are under 500, 700, 200. It's like the Fortune 500 list. Where I agree entirely with Professor Yadav is that once the world is into this ranking game, ranking business, it's like Olympics. You could be an also-ran. I still recall a very interesting conversation with Professor Jayant Nadlikar once in a different context, where I said, well, you never got the fellowship of the Royal Society. So he sort of looked at me very weirdly and said, but there is a great joy of doing science at a particular level. So you don't have to climb the Everest. You don't have to win the Wimbledon. You don't have to have a gold medal at Olympics. If you have participated at that level, it is joy enough. I think, as Dewey said, education is an adventure of ideas. My second problem is, I think, where she would agree with me, and she is now partly responsible for the quality of Indian education at the UGC. I think the problem is Indians will never compete at the level of excellence with something like Caltech, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, Ivy League or Oxbridge, because they are centuries-old universities, and we, after all, our oldest universities are the presidency ones 125, 30, 40 years old. The other problem is that we talk in terms of excellence in higher education. We are not worried about the excellence in school education. We cripple our students' originality from day one, forcing on them an alien language to learn and think about. We also make them competitive to get into IITs, so the quota coaching institutes are institutes of excellence, which don't have their peer anywhere else in the world. And then I think as we have another participant here, Professor Bandyopadhyay, whom I have had the pleasure and honor of knowing. He has worked both in a public university and a private university, more than one private university. There are private universities of one kind, of the other kind. I would not mince words. You could have somebody like Ashoka University, and you could have somebody like a fly-by-night university, 130 established in one day by the fatwa of the Chief Minister in Chhattisgarh some years back. You have distance learning, and I think with all due respect to the institution where Professor Yadav is just joined, UGC, I think part of the problem is the UGC. The UGC decides the pay scales. UGC issues recommendatory orders will become mandatory by the time they reach the vice-chancellor. They cut the funds when it comes. She's not responsible for any one of this. This happened all before her time. Yes. Now the problem is when the UGC says that everybody should have a PhD, you devalue your PhD. When you say 300 API and publications, everybody has paid publications, not in peer group reviewed publications. So you systematically demolish the standard of education. There were private universities in this country like Vishwabharati, like Jamia Millia, like at one stage BHU, which did not depend on the government, or AMU, and had excellence. Now I think we have compromised on excellence in all of life. We want to succumb to political pressure, have AIMSs everywhere, IITs everywhere. So a story and a half of a building gives you a regional center for IIM or IIT or AIMS. God save us from this race.
We'll get to how we come back to, ensuring that we establish that excellence once again in just a bit. But before that, let me get in Professor Bandyopadhyay into the picture as well. Professor Bandyopadhyay, nearly 200 million Indians are in the age group of 18 to 25, that university-going age group. Now, something is not done as far as our higher education is concerned. Do you believe that these young minds are going to be in trouble in the near future?
unless until energy.
Well, there seems to be some technical issue with the line there, but we'll try and reconnect with Professor Bandyopadhyay in just a bit. In the meantime, let me get in TK Arun as well. You know, TK Arun, demographic dividend will turn to demographic disaster if we don't do something real soon, won't it? You know, this demographic dividend is so talked about, and, you know, everyone's talking about how India is going towards, you know, ensuring that people of this age are going to do something great. But if there is no quality education, what greatness will they achieve?
Yeah, obviously this is true. But before that, let me say a few things about this ranking. This QS ranking, to my mind, is the least desirable of the major international rankings of universities. 50% of their weightage is for reputation, of which 40% of this 50 percentage points is derived from a survey of invited academics. Now, invited academics might not know about universities in India. They might know at best about, say, Delhi University or one of the prominent universities in the major urban centers. They know nothing about other universities. 10% is based on reputation as expressed by people who employ the students who have come out from these universities. Now, obviously, IITs find a major place in these. A lot of people who actually have made an impact on their employers are the engineers who are passed out of IITs. But that is, as Professor Pant said, no bearing on how effective a university is in opening up minds to new ideas, to creating new concepts. So this ranking, I wouldn't bother too much about this particular ranking. But there is no escaping the fact that the quality of higher education in India is actually quite bad. So we have to improve that across the board, not just focusing on a few institutions. And there are a number of reasons. Number one reason is that the universities don't pay enough or hire enough faculty. Some of the oldest colleges in this country make do with, say, 16 colleges, 16 full-time faculty members and a few temporary lecturers, and handle thousands of students. How can these institutions produce any quality output? Now, why are we not in a position to hire enough faculty or pay them enough sufficiently attractive salary? Firstly, the government doesn't spend enough on higher education, and secondly, we don't charge students enough fees. To my mind, underpaying university faculty is the biggest elitist remedy for higher education. If you cannot hire good faculty, there will be some people who are well off enough in their own circumstance and not require a salary or earning to make their living, who are fond of academics and still come to teaching. Some people, because they are happy only with teaching and not with anything else, will still end up in teaching. But these kinds of people will be relatively few, and they'll end up in a few institutions of excellence in this country, leaving the rest of the field open to people who could not get a job elsewhere and thus by default become teachers. And how will they in turn produce quality students? So you need to pay teachers a salary which is good enough to attract the best talent in this country. Only then we'll have higher education and quality. Another reason is a low ambition of an industry. The best universities in the world produce top quality research because they collaborate with industry in producing research. They will identify research projects, fund them, and with matching fund from the government, these universities will produce world-beating ideas. They will produce new instruments, all kinds of technology, everything. What do our industry do? Hardly any research is carried out by industry within themselves or by outsourcing to universities. This is another reason. Third reason, as again Professor Pant said, we don't focus on schools. Our school education is something which, instead of opening minds, is focused on rote learning. This is a cultural issue.
Yes.
We have a tradition of calling the first Shankaracharya Sarvajna, he who knew everything. The idea that knowledge is finite is built into your culture, which is completely stupid.
Sure.
We have to understand that everything is open to question, challenge. Instead of that, we teach our students to actually accept things by rote learning. The knowledge already exists. Your job is to master that. That is scholarship. This is our ideal learning. and we dump it into our students' heads right from the primary school.
Fair enough.
So all these are the issues which actually come in the way.
I'm told that Professor Bandyopadhyay has joined us on the program once again. Professor Bandyopadhyay, I was asking you actually, nearly 200 million Indians are aged between the age group of 18 and 25. And if our higher education quality is not improved at the earliest, these young impressionable minds are definitely going to have trouble in the near future, aren't they?
I entirely agree with this statement, because you see, I compare to the ranking one. Whether we like it or not, I agree with Professor Yadav. Ranking is going to be there because the type of employment are going to be available across the world. Needs and demands that the institution should be known across the world, and there comes the business of ranking. That's point number one, my comment. Point number two comment is this, that are you really following the true meaning of education? Education means the use of hand, use of head, and use of heart. That means a total transformation of the mind to develop their skills, to develop the knowledge using head, and to develop their attitude. So that integrated approach of education, somewhere we have missed in our Indian education system. And I think that is the need of the hour to revive that. How do we provide this holistic education? And this holistic education, unless and until we bring in to the context, then possibly we are going to create a huge amount of disasters. Now, this young mind, unless and until we engage them, job provider than a job seeker, and creating that type of ambience in the country to have the job creation by these students who will be passing from this education institution, we are going to create another disasters. Now, point number three, if I want to mention that why the Indian educational systems are not coming up to the mark, barring a very few, maybe 8 or 10, why the others are not coming? There are macro issues, there are micro issues. Micro issues, how these universities are being managed, who are managing them, what are their level and quality by themselves to manage those institutions. And there are rampant interferences from every corner of the society. And if you just look at these institutions, starting with the selection of the faculty, up to the selection of the student, up to the selections of the staff, I mean everything, there is a political interference, there is a bureaucratic interferences. No country in the world can afford to have such type of interferences to the educational system.
Sure.
Education has to be provided the autonomy. What is that autonomy? That's the micro issue that I am talking about. And macro issues, what is the investment? Look at what is the percentage of GDP we are giving to the higher education. The state universities are dying, getting killed. However, the majority of the students are going. Now, if you look at our budget, 80% students are studying in these universities, state universities, and 20% are studying in the central institution. But when the budget allocation comes, 80% budget gets guzzled up by this 20% institution, and 20% budget only goes to this 80% institution. And it's a pathetic condition. Teachers do not get their salary in time.
Those are valid points that you're making. The way they are
appointed is not proper, and so on and so forth.
Those are valid points that you're making. I'm going to take the points that you're making to Professor Yadav and, find out from her what is being done as far, as a member of the UGC, Professor Yadav, a lot has been said about, how so much needs to be done to improve our level of education. Professor Bandyopadhyay spoke about a holistic approach to education, and he said holistic education is what is required. What is it that you're looking at as far as education is concerned? How do we take it to the next level?
I think it's very interesting what Professor Bandyopadhyay said. We all agree. And Professor Pant also talked about the rankings and the education and the kind of regulations, maybe even Mr. Arun said. We are told in the UGC that we are trying to give them more and more autonomy, so we can't regulate. Because when we talk about quality, how do we ensure quality? If there are all kinds of universities, they all look at funding from this source or that source, this state government or the central government. What we've done is I think we could have diverted. I would agree with both of them that till the school education is not good, how can you really have higher education, which is quality education? But given the situation, when we are almost like killing public education, we've almost killed school education, I would say. If you look at the Pratham report or you look at the reality around, even the RTE which has come up, it has just destroyed the public education system. I don't know about others, but we were products of public education and we've done well, I think. But now the school education is producing kids which come to us in colleges. Of course, now I'm far removed, but who don't know how to read and how to write and how to speak. So then suddenly you can't turn them into excellent people. And the excellent ones which are being produced by the public education here goes to world high-ranked institutions if they can afford to, otherwise they get the scholarships. So earlier it was a colonial system that we had to go for the best. Now we're going again, it's a drain of resources here. And that's why I think ranking becomes important for Indian institutions. I would still hold the ground, despite you not agreeing, because it's your money and our money, those who have kids around in the world institutions, it's going out.
Sure.
And what Professor Bandyopadhyay has said just now, I do agree. But I said we were expanding, and we expanded so fast. Quality and quantity really can't go together very easily. I don't say it's impossible, but can't go easily. And in India till now, there was a dichotomy. The dichotomy was you wanted to have excellent institutions, but you wanted to control them also.
Sure.
You wanted to have excellence, but you didn't want to fund them enough. So all these things can't go together. Then you put education in concurrent list, and you see these state systems have, I think, destroyed, I would say, very good colleges turned into universities, or universities completely killed. Why? Because there's direct political interference and they're not bothered about giving them either autonomy or funding.
Fair enough.
There are universities, you have 5 teachers. A university having, or maybe 50 teachers.
Right.
Delhi University College has 200 teachers.
Due to shortage of time, I'm going to move on to Professor Pant. Now, Professor Pant, a lot has been said about primary education and what needs to be done at the primary level. But what can you really do when you pay a teacher in a city like Delhi, in a city like Bangalore, in a city like Mumbai, less than 10,000 rupees a salary a month? How is that teacher going to be motivated enough to teach?
No, I think we get back to the university education. I mean, there's a broader compass. I think I would only make myself clear on one issue. I'm not against ranking per se. I'm only speaking against the American university rankings, which, as Arun pointed out, are loaded in favor of their universities to begin with. I think we have our own ranking system. NAC is there. NIRF is there. The problem is that we are not honest about our rankings. We have a very funny caste system. Like the old Brahmins, there are the private fully funded rich universities, there are central universities, there are state universities, and Professor Yadav, I couldn't agree with her more. There is political interference, there are son of soil principle, and you equate ultimately a degree as recognized by UGC is a degree at par for getting into UPSC or getting into a job somewhere else. So people are so obsessed by the recognition of the university by UGC. The bureaucratic interference is pretty bad. Political interference is very bad. The state universities have a chief minister being the chancellor, where elsewhere there are chief justices for a national law university. You have a problem, genuine problem. They are de-recognizing it. UGC will probably take care of, UGC and AICT will merge. But we have seen what happened to the Knowledge Commission proposed earlier. There are powerful vested interest in university education. What distresses me more, we restrain the access of underprivileged to an educational system. We had a brilliant open university system of IGNOU.
Yes.
Now we say a person who hasn't gone through a 10+2 cannot enter an open university system, which is an oxymoron of the first order.
Right.
Where the Supreme Court comes out with a judgment or an order, the degrees awarded by the IGNOU or a distance learning are not equal, other things being equal elsewhere. So I think if you systematically dismantle your education system, and then say, how are we not in the rankings? I think we should worry more about our own rankings than anybody else.
Arun,
I would just add, I had been Vice Chancellor IGNOU, and so I'm really, have been into this. We had very good professional education, which is B.Ed and DLEd, and we were much better than so many private institutions, but the vested interest was so high. We were training, there are teachers in this country who are teaching without any degree.
Right.
So we were trying to train them. But this was stopped saying that distance education, and this continues.
Sure.
That you can't have first degree of education professional education degree through distance education, unless you already have something like regular degree. So how do you go towards excellence if you go into private players completely?
Indeed. Indeed. Are things going to change anytime in the near future? Can we expect that, or do you, or, you know, it's something that's not going to happen anytime soon?
The only signs that are visible are things of deterioration, particularly on the culture on campuses. For all that is bad with the university system, our universities are places where people could actually discuss things frankly without inviting any backlash from within the campus or outside. Today, that's not the situation. Today, university teachers are being boycotted for expressing certain opinions. Teachers are being suspended for inviting certain faculty members from other universities. Teachers are labeled nationalist or anti-national. These kind of highly intolerant, illiberal ways of dealing with academia can only destroy the universities. You might have an official program saying create world-class universities, but world-class universities cannot be, grafted by policy design. They have to organically grow from within, from the academic culture, and that requires freedom, autonomy, and complete tolerance and openness to new ideas and criticism.
Right.
Unless we promote that, we cannot have a quality education. Secondly, the funding part. I see no reason why we cannot have tuition fees which are realistic, which cover the cost. After all, students who pay, say, 25,000 rupees a quarter in school, when they go to university, they pay a few hundred rupees,
yes,
at most a few thousand rupees. Why? At the same time, there should be a system of liberal school education loans and scholarships, so that needy students who are qualified to study further and have ambitions to study further are able to.
Indeed.
So we need a way of funding higher education, both in greater measure by the government and by the students themselves. Only then can you actually have faculty who are paid and a sufficient number of faculty, and then produce some kind of quality.
Indeed. Professor Bandyopadhyay, one final comment on the program. Close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
My remarks would be, if we really want to change ourselves, there is a total need of overhauling. The regulatory system should be absolutely put in place as a regulator, not as an inspector. And there are so many statutory bodies in the country. There are 22 statutory bodies who controls the education, higher education. And what is the need of those so many statutory bodies? Point number one. And point number two, you see, we need to look at our strategy of higher education. What is our strategy for higher education? Where is the system is in place? Where is the structure is in place? Where is the processes are in place? I mean, we have to relook. If we really want to overhaul our higher education system, we need to relook the structure, system, processes, and strategies. Unless and until that we do it, then possibly we will be going on debating those issues. But ultimately, on the ground, nothing is going to come out.
Right.
And the regulator, in the name of the regulation, the type of Inspector Raj is going on. I mean, this is not at all conducive for any higher education system.
Fair enough. Okay, on that note, we'll have to call it a wrap. We'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Sushma Yadav, DK Bandyopadhyay, TK Arun, and Pushpesh Pant, thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.